And what we're going to talk about next is the alignment of the whole company. So for people who've been here a while, you guys remember V2MOMs that we did like 2 years ago. And then we had some like, what's a V2MOM? I read the website, like I read this web article, and we changed V2MOMs to VPMOMs so people would stop reading random articles. And then we hired a bunch of Salesforce people, and they're like, what's a VPMOM? So we're back to V2MOMs. But ultimately, it's the same thing. What it really does is, what is a V2MOM? It's really about it's having a tool that's really speeding communication and creating complete alignment about a company. And the value of these V2MOMs goes up as the number of people increase, right? So, N squared is getting bigger in terms of the number of conversations we have to have between individual people. And a V2MOM is how we get to clarity. So vision is define, what do we want to do, right, as a company? And then this will cascade to the departments. But as a company, what do we want to do? The values is, well, how are we going to execute on that vision? What are our priorities and principles in order? Like, what's the most important? What's the second? What's the third? Methods are really actions that everyone needs to take in order for us to achieve our vision. Obstacles are going to identify the challenges and the things in the way, the problems we have to solve in order to be successful. And then measures is, how do we know that we actually solve the problem? How do we know we achieve what we set out to do? And by setting these out, the vision, the values, the methods, the obstacles, and the measures will have alignment. And this conference is a lot about sharing this and really hearing back from everyone. Well, what does this mean exactly? How do you think about this? What exactly are we going to do here? Having those conversations and aligning the whole company is the most powerful thing we can do. We are in the early days of something huge, and it's about being on the same page so that we can put all that wood behind the right arrows. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to introduce the V2MOM for the company. And we're actually doing pretty well on time. So we might actually be able to add a little bit more extra time to the break. So really good progress on that. Vision. Our vision is to make Mattermost an indispensable tool for software builders. We're the command center for Devsecops teams and everything they do. It's really that simple. We're indispensable. When you think about the amazing technologies that are really going to shape the future and what's happened in the past, what is the sort of system of record for DevSecOps teams? What is the command center? What is the operating environment for those? When you think about like, hey, I've got my bash shell. When you think about Vim, these tools are just part of what I do. When you think about sudo apt-get install Mattermost and what that brings to you, that's the vision. How do you make it indispensable? The values that we're going to lead us towards that vision are really about three pieces. One's about trust. So trust it's a leadership principle as well. It's how we behave in the company. And for this year, we're really going to focus on this as the number one. How do we earn trust from customers and colleagues? We're going to test everything we do against that trust metric. One of the things we're starting on is the journey to cloud, and that's going to change a lot of the ways that we operate, right? It's going to be, how do we handle customer data? How do we think about the certifications and the processes that we do to have the right uptime, to have the right data privacy, to respect our customers in the right way? Trust is hugely important. It's about transparency, honesty, the willingness to give bad news and avoid surprises. And it's really treating our colleagues and our customers the way we'd want to be treated. The second is growth. So growth is continually seeking ways to intentionally grow our capabilities, our community, and our business. And a lot of that's going to be about revenue. Revenue is the end goal, but along the way, we have to build all the other things to build a really great, enduring, generational business. And part of that is balancing the near and the long term. So when we think about growth, when we think about revenue, it's going to be a balance between, hey, here's some high priority things that we need, that all customers need, and here's how we can think about accelerating them in the near term. But it's also thinking about the infrastructure and the architecture and the roadmap for long-term revenue and long-term growth. And the last piece is around iteration, right? So how do we, as an open source company, think about getting things out as quickly as possible so that we can get feedback, so we can work with our stakeholders and we can listen? How do we be more transparent? How do we be more open? So at the time we're designing things, in a ticket, our customers can go and say, this is what you're building. By the way, I don't really need this piece. I need these two other things. By the way, hey, this is something that you can do a lot quicker, and it's going to give you 5x the value in half the time. How do we get that exposure, and how do we be open, and how do we start shipping things so that we can get that feedback and we can build a better product long term? So the vision, the values, and now we're talking about the methods. So here's the 6 things that are most important for this year. The first is the Devsecops Command Center. This is the information we shared in the product vision. That's where we're going to go sort of 5, 10 years out. And then the roadmap for that DevSecOps team is really going to be laid out by Jesse and Ian Tao and their teams. So they'll be up here answering questions about the DevSecOps Command Center. It's really about, hey, how do you become that indispensable piece? Number 2 is about grow DevOps awareness, right? So as Lindsay mentioned, as Lindsay mentioned, and many people have talked about, it's like how do we make sure people have heard of us? Like when you walk into like a conference, people and it's happening at FOSDEM, it's happening at KubeCon. You walk in, they come by their booth, and they're like, "We love Mattermost. We love using this." People are coming out of the woodwork. People are recommending us. And how do we unlock that? How do we get people blogging more about that? How do we get people tweeting more? How do we get people having conversations about Mattermost and sharing their best practices and creating community? How do we put that all together? How do we grow awareness? Then we've got self-service cloud. This is self-service and cloud. So there's sort of 2 pieces here. One is, as we talked about the journey, how do we get developers buying much more faster? How do we start thinking about in the product? How do we drive people to think about like the commercial features? How do we let them unlock more value, and how do we guide them? And if we do this right, we do this at scale, there's a huge business there. Just in self-serve, which really hasn't been unlocked. Like in the product now, you have to there's nothing in the product right now that really takes you to the website. You kind of have to go to both and be like, I'm missing this feature. I kind of wish it's like SSO. I have a lot of money. Oh well. And we really got to start educating people on the value. There's so much opportunity there. The other part of self-serve actually becomes our very first cloud service, right? Like it's a self-serve portal. You're going to register. You're going to be able to have an account. You'll be able to expand. You'll be able to do billing, and that's our first real cloud product. Right now on the website, there's like a little form you fill out, but that's not a SaaS service. That's a form, right? But this is our first sort of SaaS service. And as we build it, we're going to be sharing and thinking about like, hey, here's how we do this best practices. Is any piece in here gets wobbly, we know what the dependencies are. We can really kind of do our incident response. We can start building out the very first pieces of cloud. And then as part of that, we're thinking about, okay, how do we start moving towards a beta of a cloud product this fiscal year that's really going to offer a lot of the DevOps Command Center to a new and different market. So that's the third. Number 4, we talked a lot about the business model, and we talked about the journeys. How do we accelerate them? How do we put the data platform in to make sure that we understand all the bottlenecks? We can quantitably go in and how do you, this is a machine where you're going to get like more revenue and more happy customers out the back if you can figure out where the conversion points are. So is it in the install? Is it in inviting people? Is it in setting up integrations well? What are the bottlenecks, and how do we quantitatively analyze them? And then how do we really make the right adjustments? How do we get the biggest ROI around these journey initiatives? The 5th one is enterprise success. So 80% of our revenue comes from like the top 20 customers. That's insane, 80%. And what that is, it's a huge opportunity to continue growing the business with large enterprise customers, but it's also an opportunity to say, hey, well, if 80% is there, we've got a self-serve, and then for like our market, like our self-serve and our sort of SMB market is sort of underserved. You see the logos that came, for all the logos we closed, a lot of those customers have a lot of room to expand. How do we think about enterprise success, the largest pieces of revenue, and how do we continue to grow that through sales, through CS, through technical onboarding, through education? How do we really expand that opportunity? And the 6th thing is really a destination workplace, right? How do we make this an even more phenomenal way to work? How do we go from 800 job applications a week to the next level? What does it mean for everyone to be like breaking down the doors? And how do we think about like the quality and the level of people that get to work here? And how do you think about accessing that enormous community? When you think about all these things put together, we're going to have a fantastic brand, DevOps Command Center, essential tool for developers. We're going to have massive awareness, really people understanding us and loving us. We're going to start going to cloud, which makes us easier to adopt and easier to adopt. We're going to accelerate the journey so that more people are discovering us faster and getting value faster. And all those things put together, this is an extraordinary place to work. It's an extraordinary company, extraordinary place to build the future together.